Peace and love, y'all. It's your brother A.D.V.I.S, and we are here with another episode of What's the Word Wednesday, Season 3, Episode 5. Now, as we usually do, let me go ahead and we're going to put up our logo for the show in the background, as well as I'm going to put the topics that we have for today in the comments. So again, as y'all are coming through, let me know how y'all doing, how y'all feeling, and what's the word. As well as shouts out to those who watch this now as well as watch this later, whether on Instagram or YouTube. If you are on YouTube, follow your boy at A.D.V.I.S Speaks, because we got more content coming on the channel, as well as we're on a goal to reach 1,000. We have reached over 400 and we are continuing to push. So with that being done and said, let's keep on pushing and let's do our thing. So shout out to all of y'all. Now let's keep it going. So for today's episode, the topics that we're going to be getting into and talking about, I should say, are the following. First, we're going to do our current events and news reports as usual for the first half. Then we're going to get into sexuality, speaking on that for a bit. And lastly, we're going to talk about the weaponization of sex and how that all together ties into this show for today. So with that, let's give it a little bit of time before we start. But again, thankful for y'all coming through with your showing your time, your effort, and please don't mind me getting up some energy, man. Getting used to this changing in weather, changing in time, as well as just scheduling wise. So don't mind me, but thank y'all for coming through and supporting. So, all right, let's see what we got. And y'all let me know if y'all can hear me, if I sound well and everything too. So please let me know. Oh, missed the show. Where it goes. Oh, what's going on? Dog days are over. What are you doing? How are you doing? Peace and love. Thank you for coming through. And tell me, how you doing? How you feeling? And what's the word? Appreciate you. Just let me know. But yeah, again, I don't know what I'm gonna say again, but I'm just gonna say again, thank y'all for being in here. All right, as we wind down with this song right here, let's go ahead and let's get into the show song, and then we're gonna get into tonight's show. So let's go for it. And I gotta turn it up. If you know it, you know it. If not, just listen along and then you'll learn, and to sing along with it. So here we go. What's the word? This season 3, y'all. And when people walk around, they be asking, they be wondering, trying to ask you and tell you. So you got to tell them like this. What's the word, y'all? What's the word? What's the word, y'all? What's the word? What's the word, y'all? What's the word? Tell them like, what's the word? What's the word? What you heard? We gotta know, yeah, what's the word? Once again, y'all, it's your brother A.D.V.I.S, and we are back with another episode of What's the Word Wednesday, Season 3, Episode 5. And we got an interesting one again for today's episode. But as y'all are coming in, please let me know how y'all doing, how y'all feeling, and what's the word. Shouts out to Superb, a.k.a. Big Sue, a.k.a. Sue in the building. How you doing, fam? As well as shouts out to Dog Days Are Over. Appreciate y'all being in here. With that, at the same time, shout outs to everyone that will be watching this either now or later on Instagram or YouTube. I won't do the YouTube spill again, but just check out your boy. And finally, let's go ahead and let's look at these 3-4 topics for tonight, and then we're going to get into the news portion of this section. So first thing we're going to be looking at again, of course, we're going to get into news and current events. Second half, we're going to be speaking about sexuality. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the weaponization of sex. So we're going to put that all together for y'all for this What's the Word. And y'all are welcome to join me. Y'all are welcome to comment, put it all in the section. Please, this is a dialogue for us to collaborate and build as a community. So don't be hesitant. Don't be afraid to do so. But with that, let's go ahead and let's get into current events and topics. So, what we have for today, I have roughly around about 7 to 8 articles that we're going to look at that caught my eye and some other different news. So, we'll keep that in head. But let's see. We got a comment already. Shoot. I haven't forgot about Monday. We've just been having terrible weather because of nearby tornadoes, so I haven't been able to. Oh, fam, don't even worry about it. It is all good. I just hope that you are staying safe and doing well where you are at. So please be careful with all the different weather changes and, just stay safe. So you're fine. You're fine. Thank you for that update. All right, let's go ahead and first article I got for y'all, which, again, it caught my eye. And every time we read this, we're going 3 paragraphs and we're out. And I would say the title of the article so you can go and look it up for yourself. So, first one we got is from MSN, aka really from ABC News. And the headline reads, "New effort underway to free cargo ship stuck in the Chepesky, if I'm saying that right, Chepesky Bay, Chesapeake Bay. I'm gonna say Chesapeake Bay, and if that's wrong, hey, again, my pronunciation is not the best. This is what y'all also come for. Hopefully, I'm just playing. Right. So again, 3 paragraphs, and we are out. So article starts off, and it reads as follows: following 2 failed attempts, a new effort got underway on Wednesday to dislodge a 130-ton fully loaded cargo ship that has been mired in the mud by Chesapeake Bay in Maryland for more than 3 weeks. U.S. Coast Guard officials say 2 large cranes and 2 barges were being moved to wherever forward container ship ran aground in shallow water, and crews are expected to begin offloading a portion of the 5,000 cargo containers aboard, hoping that this will give the vessel the buoyancy required to free it. It said Chesapeake. All right, Chesapeake. All right, boom. All right, that's what I thought. They're still staging the equipment so that they can remove the containers. It's going to take a few days to get that set up. A spokesperson for the Coastal Guard told ABC News Wednesday afternoon. She said that once the cranes and barges are in place, crews could start removing containers by this weekend or by early next week. Yeah. And you're welcome. Been home gaming. It's all good. It's all good. But reason why I wanted to get on this article too is because we're still having a lot of, again, item shortages, cargo shortages, and even though there's some still waiting on the bays and docks, whether if it's down for me down over here in LA, over there in the Los Angeles Bay down there, if I'm saying it, I'm gonna be saying it wrong, as well as in different places, knowing that in this particular case, the buoyancy on this thing was not what it needed to be, so it's stuck. I don't know. Again, there are people on there, as well as there's tons of cargo that, again, could be some of people's items, storages for a number of different things. So it's important, again, to look at and know all of this, because then you wonder why prices are going up high for a number of different things, or why things are still being delayed, as well as it can be a scary situation. So I just brought it up because, again, it caught my eye, and that's some things that could be happening. But there's some efforts underway to get this from out of here in Maryland in the Chesapeake Bay. But with that, y'all, again, this article came from ABC News. Headline reads, new effort underway to free cargo stuck in the Chesapeake Bay. With that, let's go ahead and let's move to the next one that I got for y'all. As well as if y'all have any news topics y'all want to share or any updates that y'all would like to share, whether if it's updates on good news for y'all, I'm going to add that in there, good news, or just anything in general that would like to share during this news portion time, please do so in the comments. Now, next article I got for y'all comes from CNN, and the headline reads, 6 key points about China's military after top general's warning. Now, this caught my eye because of the fact that for some of us, I've been out of the loop of what's still been going on between Russia and Ukraine. But again, China being one of those countries that said that would back Russia or is backing Russia in some way, shape, or form. So it's very interesting, again, to see some, I'm not going to say movement per se, but know about the military. So here we go. 3 paragraphs and we're out. So China and Russia are bent on changing the rule-based current global order, according to America's top general. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Mark Milley's prognosis, offered on Tuesday as he asked Congress for money for the Pentagon, is for an era where large-scale war between major powers is a possibility. We are entering a world that is becoming more unstable, and the potential for significant international conflict between great powers is increasing, not decreasing. Russia's invasion of Ukraine threatens not only European peace and stability, but global peace and stability that my parents and a generation of Americans fought so hard to defend, said Milley says. He actually isn't asking for enough money for the Pentagon, according to Republicans and some other moderate Democrats, which noted the Department of Defense didn't properly account for inflation when it requested $773 billion for the 2023 fiscal year, a 4% boost that is less than inflation, which is currently the highest it's been in 40 years. Going up, y'all. Not gonna say too much on more of that, but I want to put these little key headings that they have, and again, you can go back and read the rest of this article for yourself. But some of the key headings they have is: 1, China has a long-term strategic goal that involves the U.S. 2, the idea that China has leapfrogged the U.S. needs content. I don't know what leapfrog. Well, leapfrog means basically gotten ahead over the U.S. 3, China's military, like Russia's, lack the human backbone the U.S. military has. 4, China and Russia are not exactly allies. 5, keep an eye on China's navy development. And 6, Putin's difficulty in Ukraine sends a message to China. Again, if you want to go read this article, it comes from CNN. And the article reads, the headline is 6 key points about China's military after top general's warning. Boom. Now, on top of that, y'all, let me see, where do I have it? I think it's right here. So, I got 2 updates with the whole COVID situation again, and about either boosters or just knowledge from the presidency, aka coming from Dr. Fauci and then FDA advisors. So next article I got for y'all comes from Prevention, but is under MSN, powered by Microsoft News. And the article headline reads, Dr. Fauci says herd immunity is unattainable for COVID-19. So we're gonna learn quickly what herd immunity is, and maybe loosely about why it's unattainable, possibly. But again, 3 paragraphs and we're out. Article reads, Herd immunity is a topic that has come up a lot as a possible way to end the COVID-19 pandemic. And while the numbers have been thrown around in the past for about what portion of the population needs to be vaccinated or infected to achieve herd immunity, top public officials say it's just unlikely to happen at this point. In a new article published in the Journal of Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci, MD, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which is the NIAID, and other NIAID scientists write that classical herd immunity for COVID-19 almost certainly is an unattainable goal. Dr. Fauci and his co-authors specifically cite the significant obstacles, these are in quotations, like substantial resistance to efforts to control the spread of SARS-CoV-2, which is the name of the virus. COVID-19 is the quote-unquote disease name of the virus for short. The virus that causes COVID-19, like the public's resistance to vaccination and mask wearing. They also note that neither infection nor vaccination appears to induce prolonged protection against SARS-CoV-2 in many or most people, making it tricky to fully prevent COVID-19 even if you've been vaccinated or infected with the virus in the past. Listen, y'all. Again, I'll read that one more time. But y'all gotta pay attention and listen. Not saying that you're not. I'm just repeating it on purpose. When you read this stuff, there's a reason certain things are said. And then I'll end with herd immunity and be done. Right. There's also a note that neither infection nor vaccination appears to induce prolonged protection, which means having a long span of protection against SARS-CoV-2 in many or most people, making it tricky to fully prevent to stop COVID-19, even if you've been vaccinated or infected with the virus in the past. Now, what's herd immunity? Herd immunity, aka population community or immunity, I should say, or community immunity, is what happens when a significant portion of a population develops immunity to an infectious disease, according to the CDC. That happens through vaccination or prior infection with a particular illness, the CDC says. And I'm going to end it there. But again, this article comes from Prevention, and the headline reads, Dr. Fauci says herd immunity is unattainable for COVID-19. Just wanted to add that in there. With that, y'all, speaking of having this prevention, but then it's not attainable anymore, this next article comes from NPR, and the headline's under Public Health, which reads, Advisors to FDA weigh in on updated COVID boosters for the fall. So now we're speaking on how there is, again, that whole push and the look of herd immunity not being unattainable due to a number of different things. Even if you are been vaccinated in the past or you've had gotten the disease, there is no way, or it's very unattainable for to get herd immunity. Now we're talking about more boosters. There's already been one, but now we're talking about the second booster. So let's see what's going on. And how you doing, Kundan? Good to see you in here. What's the word? Good to see you. So, 3 paragraphs and we're out. Article reads, in a day-long virtual meeting, a panel of experts advising the FDA came out in a general support of efforts to develop new COVID-19 vaccine tailored to variants. So there was talk too about there being different COVID-19 vaccines for specific variants. I think Pfizer, Moderna, a few of them was working on doing something of that sort. But again, let's continue. The committee wasn't asked to vote on specific recommendations to the agency, but instead discussed the framework for making decisions about when to change the viral strain or strains used for future vaccines, including boosters. It's likely the panel will reconvene in May or June to consider a more specific proposal for the reformulation, of COVID-19 vaccines. The procedure used to tweak annual flu vaccines to match circulating strains is one model that may inform the process for COVID-19. But there are still many unknowns about how the coronavirus may change and stark differences between the influenza virus and the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Again, for all y'all out there who was saying that this was going to turn into, if not an annual, if not, 2 times a year type of shot, here y'all go. Just like the flu shot, y'all spoke it into existence. It was looking that way. So I'm honestly not going to go more into it. There's more here, but there's going to be talks again about a booster shot, which is starting to make sense that it looks like every 6 months or annually, once a year around flu season. Now there might be a new season of COVID season. I don't know. But again, the article comes from NPR and the headline reads, "Advisors to FDA weigh in on updated COVID boosters for the fall." Now, y'all, let's keep going. All right. Got a few more and then we'll be done with these for today. But for all my Mountain Dew lovers out there, a real quick one for y'all. I have some stuff here, but for my Mountain Dew lovers out here, there is an article from Stacker. And the headline reads, "Mountain Dew is banned in nearly 30 countries. Here's why. Plus more American favorites that are barred elsewhere." Because remember, we've talked about, at least in a few What's the Word Wednesdays, we were talking about really on a health tip about a lot of this stuff that you need to read it, GMO foods, etc., etc. Got a lot of folks with Mountain Dew, but in other places you can't find this stuff. Now let's figure out why. So here we go. Common U.S. foods that are banned in other countries. Consumers in the United States put their trust in organizations such as the FDA and the Department of Agriculture to keep packaged foods, fish, livestock production safe. But to what standard? Many American food additives, think like flame retardants and suspected carcinogens. If y'all don't know what carcinogens is, these are also chemicals and basically things that are linked to causing cancer. Those are carcinogens. And production standards have been approved domestically, are banned or strictly regulated abroad. This is all the additions to the U.S. liberal policies on genetically modified organisms. If y'all didn't know what GMO was, genetically modified organisms, which are more restricted or banned outright in other countries as well. So what chemicals are lurking in ingredients of some Americans' foods? What production practices are they having in this world? So let's see. I'm going to look, we do a few of them, and then we'll continue. And I'll tell you, again, where you can go look at this stuff. So one of them, farm-raised salmon, they said, it's banned in Australia and New Zealand because it contains a petrochemical. A petrochemical. If y'all know what petrol oil and all this other stuff is, it's very interesting. In farm-raised salmon. Another one. There's dairy milk out here that have RBST or RBGH hormones. So those are different hormone chemicals, artificial hormones that help to, again, make your milk taste good and things of that sort. So some of those are banned in Canada, as well as the UN has banned these type of milk hormones. Mountain Dew, which is the main one I was telling y'all. So Mountain Dew. It says this citrus flavored soft drink uses brominated vegetable oil as a emulsifier to keep it sealed in. BVO is banned in Japan and the European Union because it contains bromine, which is an element found in brominated flame retardants. So I know if you're flame retardants, which can build up in your body and possibly lead to memory loss, as well as skin and nerve problems. Again, accumulation of a lot of this stuff over time does the body harm. But I'm going to stop with that one. Not trying to, again, go too further with it. But if you want to look up more of this stuff, I might actually keep this one up here. The headline is from Stacker, powered by MSN or Microsoft News. And the headline reads, Mountain Dew is banned in nearly 30 countries. Here's why. Plus more American favorites that are banned or barred elsewhere. Alright. Now I'll do a quick update. The next article, a quick update on what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. And I'll just read headlines. I'm not going to read paragraphs, but Russia-Ukraine war. What happened today for April 6th? One of the headlines. All Russian ground forces have left the areas of Kyiv, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, and northern Ukraine. More than 500 people were evacuated from the besieged city of Mariupol after days of failed attempts. The U.S., European Union, and Group of 7 nations are enacting new sanctions on Russia. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Brussels to meet with G7 and NATO's foreign ministers. And another one, the Justice Department is helping investigate possible war crimes by Russia and Ukraine. I'm going to leave it there. But those are the updates of what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. I did hear about more of the sanctions, but a lot of these other things I wasn't privy to or didn't know. So those are your updates. Right. There's something I didn't hear about or know what was going on, but there was another mass shooting that happened. I honestly not going to speak too in depth about this, but this one has actually happened up north in California, specifically in Sacramento. So this article comes from NPR, and the headline from this reads, the Sacramento mass killing involved at least 5 shooters, police says. If you want to know a little background, I'll give a little background, but then I won't go further into it. And again, if y'all have any articles or any news you want to share, please throw it in the comments. Highly appreciate it. Thank you for it. So, article reads, Sacramento, California. The mass killing that left 6 people dead and 12 wounded outside bars just a block from California's capital last weekend was a gunfight involving at least 5 shooters from rival gangs. Sacramento police said Wednesday. Me and these days. Police said they identified at least 5 gunmen, but there may have been more. Only 2 suspects, both brothers wounded by the gunfight, have been arrested in connection with the shooting, and so far only face firearms charges. Until Wednesday's announcement, police have been silent on the motive for the shooting that erupted early Sunday as bars were letting out. Rapid fire bursts of over 100 gunshots echoed through the streets as terrified patrons ran for their lives and others were hit by bullets. Fortunately, authorities credited witnesses who contributed nearly 200 videos, photos, and other tips with helping the investigation. Police declined to name the 2 gangs involved or the affiliation of any suspects. I'm not going to say any more to it, but for those who are up there in Northern California and even for those that's around out there, there's a lot going on, y'all. So please be mindful, be cautious of what's going on around you. Of course, just always make sure that you're aware and paying attention. But again, sorry for those who were lost in this situation, as well as sending love, energy, protection to the families and all those who are involved in this. But with that, y'all, that's all the news I got. There's more, but again, I'm going to just keep it at that so we can get into the next topics, which is going to be about sexuality. But before we do that, my disclaimer, of course, if you want to come on, because you are welcome. Everyone is welcome to come on and again, speak and talk about these topics. But when you do that, you waive your right again to be seen and all this different stuff, because I will put this on Instagram and I will put this on YouTube. So if you're not comfortable with your face being seen or being on here, then it is fine. You can stay within the comments and give your thoughts from there. If you're comfortable with coming on and know it's going to be on Instagram and YouTube, please come on, because again, it makes this even more and more interactive as well as building. So that's what we're doing here. So if you want to, please request. I'll bring you up. And now with that, let's go ahead and let's move into tonight's next topic, which we're going to be talking about sexuality. Now, before I even give y'all a definition and at least a bit of some grounding so we'll know where we're going with this, first I want to give y'all my reasoning to why this is a topic that came up. One, I just write these topics down in my phone, and this happened to be the next one that came up. Two, reason why this is a topic that came up. Two, as well as because we're in this era of, again, exploring this concept and this idea, again, of sexuality, how it fits into, quote unquote, general norms of society, and how do we navigate around this, because it's such a big question, a lot of confusion, as well as learning how or where either you land on this spectrum, or if you're still on the traditional, quote unquote, route, whatever you want to end up putting it, still be traditional in your own way. But again, what do we see as the general norms here? But with that, before I go ahead and I touch on this, y'all let me know in the comments too, when you hear the word sexuality, what comes to mind? Whether there's examples, whether if it's a definition, whether if it's one word. Tell me, when you hear the word sexuality, what comes to mind? But as y'all are doing that, actually I got a comment here. It says, news with personal meaning for me. There is now a second U.S. university that officially recognizes Hindu phobia. It is historic. Oh, wow. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. They've moved it and made it specific. Because I know, isn't that of like different particular races? Isn't it xenophobia? I may be wrong. Y'all can, again, correct me on that. Appreciate the corrections, because I don't know everything. And I don't pretend to think I know everything. I'm learning as much as y'all are learning as well. So, y'all give me that. So, as y'all are putting that down in here, I'm going to read from two different websites that speak on sexuality, because the regular one that I use still was a little, not say confusing, but not much more there. So here we go. From Webster's Dictionary, it says sexuality, noun, is the quality or state of being sexual. A, the condition of having sex. B, sexual activity. C, expression of sexual oh my goodness. I'm going to even try. How you receive it, as well as, or interest, especially when excessive. Now that was interesting, especially when it is incessive, or excessive, I should say. But that's from the Webster's. Now I want to go to the other dictionary that I have and give some more definitions. Again, sexuality being this noun. It says the quality of being sexual, especially sexual orientation and behavior. The manner of being sexual or engaging in sexual activity. 2, the condition of being divided into sexes or of reproducing sexually. So there's an act, behavior, as well as identification. So that's what I'm getting from sexuality, at least the definition here. That there is an act, there is behavior, and that there is a identification. So that's what I'm going to say. But since we have that there, let me see what else we got. It says Rutgers University last year was the first to recognize Hinduphobia, which was also historic. Shout out to Rutgers. All of that up in here. Right. Now, okay, you're wondering, okay, where are we going with this? Why do we even, need to have this talk, or why are you want to even bring this up besides, again, it being, like I said, it was a topic I had before, as well as all the confusion surrounding it. Why do I want to bring this up? Well, I want this to also be an informative part, and it's an informative aspect, not only for myself, but for all of us here, to at least have an awareness of not only all the spectrums of what sexuality can end up being, but also find ways, again, to navigate it and to use it to help if you want to identify yourself in a certain way, or honestly, so you can just have an understanding of a brief understanding of other different sexualities. But I'm gonna go and I'm gonna just list off. We're gonna go through and talk about them and just add them from there, and then speak about really what sexuality holds when it comes to just the whole population in total. But with that, what's going on, Kundan? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I will talk about sexuality, but I'm also just, yeah, really excited about this historic occasion.
Yes.
Um, I'm both happy and sad at the same time because,
What's
it is significant that these two universities recognized it, but the very fact that that's even historic
Yes.
is very revealing of how much prejudice there is still against Hindus and how much work there is still to be done because this is like 7 decades after India's independence. There's only two US universities that officially recognize Hindu phobia as a thing that even exists.
Yeah.
Right now, we're still in the stage where a lot of people like recognize Islamophobia, but they straight up deny Hindu phobia as a thing that doesn't even exist when it totally does. And for those who don't know, there's a website called understandinghinduphobia.org, and the working definition is a set of antagonistic, destructive, and derogatory attitudes and behaviors towards Sanatana Dharam, Hinduism, and Hindus that may manifest as fear or hatred. That's the official definition.
Mm. There you go, y'all. And thank you for sharing that. I'm not surprised at this,
Mm-hmm.
as well as it was just a matter of time, because again, the US still has so much that they need to get together, while at the same time of
Yeah.
it being such a place of a, especially California being a place of a melting pot in all different cultures, backgrounds, ethnicities, etc., all coming together. There's going to be eventual, of course, clashing of all of that culture.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised after a while, again, there's going to start being different
Mm-hmm.
behaviors and then titles that come out of that. Because again, I know that if I was correct, you can correct me on this so I can look it up too. Wasn't almost that particular title of like hate, not hatred, but just like fear of other different races and ethnicities and cultures was xenophobia or some shape or form of that?
Yeah, xenophobia is fear of all cultures that are not your own, all foreign
Mm,
cultures. So it's
okay.
all encompassing. That's xenophobia.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now it's
Yeah.
branching out. See, again, a lot of this stuff
Yeah.
will I use it as an analogy of a tree. The tree is the whole general idea, belief, body, and whatever it is. and all the roots, all the branches, all the leaves and everything else are the quote unquote fruits, or if not, the extensions of what that is in different specific
Mhm.
forms. So that's how I look at that, is that we haven't traveled through all the other specific forms of that particular phobia under xenophobia. So I'm not surprised. But
Yeah.
good thing that has at least been noted now, even more than ever now. So
Hmm.
with
Yeah.
that, let's go ahead. Let's talk about sexuality. What I was about to do, Kundan,
Sexuality.
yeah. What I was about to do, Kundan, is I was gonna go through a list of different types of, sexualities or sexual orientations, which it seems the
Mm,
definition itself it has three components for me that I already said earlier. One, that there's an action, which they're talking about just in the action of sex. There's a behavior, the way that you're expressing yourself, as well as there is a identification of where you put yourself, not in per se a box, but how you would tell somebody how you are expressing yourself, as well as how you act out with that particular your sexuality. So I was gonna go down a whole grip of a list of ones. I try to speak on a lot of them, but there is a lot. There's some of them that I ain't even never heard of that I'm like interesting to even think about. Again, that whole tree of sexuality, and then all the
yeah,
other
that's a lot.
the different
Hmm.
branches and stuff. So I'm gonna go down them, and then again, if you want to also speak on or even
Especially in
share,
the, especially when we get into the asexual, aromantic
I'm already.
spectrum.
That's the first. This is the first
That's
ones they got
that's
up
when there
here.
are that's when there are so many nuances because some people can be, romantic but still be asexual. So meaning they might still have a girlfriend or boyfriend,
Yeah.
but they might not have sex with them, or they might not feel sexual attraction for them. Uh, and then there are people who are both aromantic and asexual, meaning that they just would never have a partner, period, right?
Mm.
So, and I say this because some people make the assumption that, oh, somebody's asexual, they wouldn't have a partner at all. No, they might still be romantic. Like,
Got
uh,
you. And with that,
yeah,
y'all, you already spoke on a few of them, but we're gonna see types of
yeah,
sexuality. The first one that
yeah.
we end up having is autoromantic, which is a person who
Hmm.
identifies as autoromantic experiences romantic attraction to others. Then we have
Hmm.
allosexual, which is the umbrella term for this, and it's a person who identifies as this, typically feels sexual attraction towards other people. They may also want to have sex with a partner. um, Many people identify with this orientation can be identified as another sexuality as well, whether if it is the other ones that we're going to get into later. So allosexual is, you can add it on to those layers of what you can identify
Oh,
yourself
yeah,
as.
allosexual is another layer on the asexual spectrum. Yeah, yeah.
Next one, androsexual, which is you feel attraction towards males, or perceived masculinity, irrespective of whether or not they were assigned male at birth. So that's
Ah,
androsexual. Yes. Aromantic, and then you started speaking on this. The person who identifies as this may not feel romantic attraction towards anyone. People who are aromantic may not want a relationship beyond friendship. Those who have this can also have another orientation. A person's romantic attraction can differ from their sexual attraction, though, because there's a romantic
mhm.
attraction, then there's a sexual attraction. For those who don't know, again,
Exactly. Yeah. Hmm.
there's
A lot of
a
people
spectrum for
conflate
all
the
of
two
this.
too. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Then you said here, boom, asexual, umbrella term again for a broad spectrum of sexual orientations. Um, It has the whole grip here, but let's see. Those who identify with this orientation do not have to abstain from sex to be asexual. Some of those orientations that are under this spectrum are sex adverse, when a person is disinterested in any type of sexual behavior. Sex favorable, they have favorable feeling. Sex indifferent, they can really not care and really whatever. Like, okay, cool. It
Hmm.
sometimes don't matter. I'm paraphrasing them right now. I'm not reading all of them.
Yeah.
Sex repulsed, which they just don't dig sex at all. Then it has
Mm-hmm.
cuposexual, which is they don't experience sexual attraction but still desire to engage in sex or have that type of relationship. Then it has libidist asexual. I'm telling y'all. Okay, those who are asexual and experience sexual feelings that can satisfy basically themselves. That's libidist asexual. Gray sexual, they experience sexual attraction either infrequently or not very intensely. So rarely. Almost like once in a blue moon, that gray area, use that
Mm-hmm.
concept for this. And then gray romantic, the same thing. They may not experience romantic attraction rarely or that strongly at all. Um, Now I know there's so many here, but again, I'll name a few. But if anything pops out on these that you want to hear too, Kundan or anybody else, just like
Mm-hmm.
stop me because there's gonna be too many for me to try to read every single one. But next one we have is autosexual. And then you have bicurious. Then you have biromantic,
Mm-hmm.
bisexual. Then we have demiromantic, demisexual. And for
Yeah,
those
that's
who
me, demisexual. Yeah.
and demisexual, person who identifies as demisexual typically only feels sexual attraction towards a person with whom they have already established a long or strong emotional bond. Then after demisexual, demiromantic again around the same thing. Remember, it's that spectrum. There's a romantic, and then there's also the sexual spectrum. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have gay, which they still have here. Then there is or this is a gyne or gino or gyno. Yeah, there's gyno. Yeah, see,
Gynosexual.
yeah, because with the way that it's spelled here, I saw the regular
Mm.
one, but then they also have it with the E. So that's why I was like, okay.
Oh.
Yeah, but gynosexual is basically they feel sexual attraction towards women, females, and perceived femininity, irrespective whether or not they're assigned female at birth. So, like
Mm.
the one previously that was a while back,
Like
if
the
I can remember,
androsexual, like the
yeah, not
opposite
the
of the
andro.
androsexual. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Then there's the heteroromantic. You
Mm-hmm.
think about it, heteroromantic.
And heterosexual.
Heterosexuality, yes. Homo romantic, and then homosexuality. So there's still some terms that people will say that are archaic right now. Some of these ones that we're saying because there's so many of them that are very similar, but they've just been updated. But again, y'all, I'm just going through them. Another one, lesbian, um, monosexual, which I'm interested in this. So monosexual is an umbrella term, which is all sexual orientations that feel a romantic or sexual attraction towards only one gender. So you can add that on to if again we only have one romantic or sexual attraction to just one gender. Then
Mm.
multisexual, multiple, pansexual or omnisexual. For those folks, I will read this one is they feel attraction towards people of all genders and sexes. Those who are pansexual is that gender is not a factor in sexual or romantic attraction. People who identify as omnisexual may be attracted to someone because of their gender, but these can overlap into either bisexuality or polysexuality. Number of them. All right. There is panromantic. I already just said polysexual. And there's queer. Then there is sciliosexual, if I'm saying that right. And that one's interesting. This one says that scolio, or it almost like looks like scoliosis, but it's not. Typically, only feel attraction towards people who are non-binary. And
Oh, and that's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Then there is spectra sexuality, which this term describes those who are romantically and sexually attracted to multiple sexes, gender, and gender identities, but not all of them. So, like a spectrum, it's a spectra. So,
Oh,
spectrum,
oh, interesting. Yeah.
yeah, and that's most of them that at least are here. There is probably a lot.
I've
There's
never
still
heard of
probably
the
a lot more,
last
but those
two.
there's
That's
more here.
really, yeah, that's really
Yeah.
cool.
So the
Yeah.
scolio, if I'm saying it right, is scolio, whatever. I'm not saying whatever, but my pronunciation, y'all
hmm
want come and laugh at it too. It's all good. Again, feeling the attraction towards people who are non-binary and the spectra sexual, being that basically is on that spectrum. Multiple sexes, gender, and gender identities, but not all of them. But now that I have put all of these out here, y'all have the information. Again, y'all, if y'all have questions, please put them out here because I know, I mean, I definitely will have them here. But again, my reason about how I wanted to do this is because, of course, it's going to set up for the next topic of the portion later on down the line. But I wanted to speak on sexuality because one of the main reasons why is, again, we have these terms and ideas of what, again, you've talked about it a lot, the binary, when it comes to gender, when it
Yeah.
comes to sexual orientation and the
hmm
feeling, and know that there is a spectrum of these things, and that not every
hmm
single person fits into the circle or the triangle. There's literally, you got your octagons, you got your dodecahedrons, you got your squares, you got all these other different shapes that folks,
hmm
again, identify and fit into. And yes, for me, sometimes having different labels is not the best, but then at the same time, it's a contradiction in within itself, because if you want someone
hmm
to be able to identify you, they at least got to have an idea of where to even start, especially,
hmm
again, if you're working on yourself and figuring stuff out. But I wanted to speak on sexuality because of the fact that, again, it's such a confusing route to run, and for some people to be able to identify and learn a lot of different sexual orientations and how that influences, again, the actions, the behavior, as well as how you identify yourself or express it to people, is very important, so that, again, we can come to not only an understanding but an understanding of where people may be coming at, as well as to lighten the fear and the unknown of a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and you can also have multiple like identities of orientation because, like for example, I'm both demisexual and pansexual because demisexual actually speaks to the mechanism of sexual attraction, how
Mm,
someone becomes attracted to somebody, whereas being pansexual or even bisexual or homosexual, heterosexual, those all speak more to who you're attracted to, right? So there is a
mm,
distinction even in those terms.
mm-hmm.
Uh,
The who and what, y'all. So we
mhm.
got the
The
who,
who, what,
the
and how. Yeah.
yes, we gonna get all the
Demisexual is the
W's, all
how.
the
Yeah.
H's.
Yeah.
Yeah, we gonna
Yeah.
there's gonna be
Yeah.
some for where. There's gonna be some from
Yeah.
when. I'm look at
hmm
I'm just putting in all that terms, but these are some of our questions that we ask ourselves, and some of these orientations or sexualities, these expressions answer those questions of to who and to what
hmm
they're here. But
hmm
again,
Yeah. One definition of demisexual that I really like is that the the primary and secondary sexual attraction mechanisms are reversed, right? The conventional mechanisms. So
mm,
that's why we require an emotional connection for us to be sexually aroused. So what that means is in people who have a regular, more on the the more on the sexual side of the spectrum, the conventional side,
yeah,
they start with the physical attraction first or the biological attraction where uh, it's all based on looks, right? It's a
yeah,
physical thing, uh, whereas and then after some time, the emotions are more like an additional layer, a secondary,
yeah,
sexual attraction mechanism that enhances the primary. Whereas in a demisexual, that's reverse, where the we
hmm.
start with the emotional connection starts first, and then the looks, the fact that somebody is good looking is like the icing on the cake. You know,
Okay, it's an addition to that. So it's not a
it's an
requirement.
addition.
It's
Yeah,
like this addition to that.
yeah,
Okay, yes.
right.
Yeah. Okay. The more you know, the more y'all learn. Again, so I guess in the spirit of some of the identifiers of the who, what, Why don't we just go through all of those? Let's go through the who, what, when, where, and how. We already speak on a bit of the why. We'll come back to it, but I want to go specifically into that. So, okay, now let's talk about then what does sexuality actually target?
Hmm.
Who can sexuality target? Where can one again find out more about sexuality? When can these realizations come to you? And I'm gonna
Hmm.
leave it at that one before I forget all the ones that I'm just coming up with. But the first one is, what is sexuality, especially on the spectrum, really targeting?
Hmm?
So I said,
What is it?
what is sexuality, specifically really targeting?
What is it targeting?
And when I'm about targeting,
Is
so yeah, go ahead.
what do you mean by targeting? Like,
So targeting in the sense of, honestly, what is sexuality trying to, basically the main point of what it's trying to tell people when you're thinking of sexuality? Because I told you we had the main three that I got from the definition, or at least from looking at these. But
oh,
what is it really trying to tell people? Is it trying to tell people, hey, I just like jumping all over the place to do something? Like,
yeah, I think it's basically just, I mean, it depends on the angle or perspective you look at it, right? On the
yeah.
more romantic or philosophical side, it's about how you love and who you love, right? That's what
Mm,
it's targeting now. Or how you connect and who you connect with on a not just on a friendship level, but really who you want to have sex with and how you want to do it, right? That's what it is. But at the more base biological level, it's just about reproduction, right? Like who you want to reproduce with
mm,
and how you want to do it, right? So that's more, I would say, slightly cynical view, right? But
mm,
for those who are more romantic, we would say it's like it's who you love and how you love.
mm. I'm with it. On my side, to add to that, what sexuality is trying to explain to us is that, again, there is a spectrum of how people see, identify,
Hmm.
interact, and show sexual attraction, romantic attraction, all these different types of
Hmm.
feelings and behaviors to people, to us. This is what it's telling us. That's what sexuality is telling us. The act again. I wish I knew again. Did the roots again? Because you have the sex and you have the ality. So almost like it's not. I don't want to say duality, but basically the state of basically the experiencing of sex. And these are just different ways that you can experience or show these expressions of sex. That's what sexuality, at least to me, is what its main point is gearing towards.
Hmm.
Now I went from what. I'll just do this because I know again it's an open ended. Um, who can sexuality apply to? Of course,
Hmm. I
sexuality.
think it applies to everyone, like not just all humans, but even all animals and even like trees and plants and fungi and microbes, because they have,
Yes,
even among even at the microscopic level, there is asexual reproduction and there's also
yes,
sexual reproduction. But interestingly enough, at the higher levels, higher in quotes, right?
mm-hmm.
Because it's relative. The more complex the bodies are, right? The more parts there are.
Yeah,
Uh, it's interesting that there is no longer asexual reproduction. There's only sexual reproduction, right? However,
mm,
that might be changing as human beings manipulate technology and try to, you know, produce babies outside their. Uh, I think they already have artificial insemination, so
yes,
it's still inside the mother's womb, but they're even now trying to produce babies outside the womb, right, to
yes,
incubate.
yes.
But that's just technology that's it doesn't exist yet. They're still in progress. Yeah.
I will say there's a challenge there, possibly, because again,
Mhm.
I'll say this, and yes, oh, he's conspiracy theory. No, again, you'll be surprised at the technology and the information and knowledge that the CIA, the FBI, and again, y'all, if y'all
Mm.
looking at me trying to listen to me, go look at Google. This is where I'm getting it from, Google, and y'all's articles. So you can get on CNN, you can get on NPR. It's coming from them. So don't look at me saying this. This information out there because of the technology, such as if people haven't heard or seen, you can look this up. There are actually robots that they're testing and said that they can sexually reproduce and being able to hold babies in
Yeah,
their
yeah.
womb.
Well, there is. I think I read an article about these nano like robots that are also sort of organic
Yeah.
simultaneously, and they are being controlled by this AI. And for the first time, these robots are reproducing,
Yes.
which is kind of scary actually. And that's a mainstream article. Like it's not a conspiracy. This was in one of the, like you said, the CBS or CNN or one of those. Yeah.
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 Everything under the sun right now, if you really scope
Yeah.
the web and do your due diligence and look stuff up, you'll find it. Whether if it is not credible or it's quote unquote
Mm.
credible, it's there. But again, I like how you were speaking on again that it's literally for everyone, every species and things on Earth. Because when I first learned about what asexual was or asexual reproduction, I learned about a sponge and how sponges can do that. When their body
Mm.
part comes off, it literally reproduces again another sponge in that particular case. So I at least know about at least asexual, as well as you learn about the different, symmetries, asymmetry, all these other different things again, keywords, y'all. Some of this keyword stuff, like the roots of words and breaking them down, you get to learn and see them at play here. But again, I agree with you when it comes to, who, again, sexuality can apply to, because we feel that sometimes there's people that's just like they feel that they are above a lot of different things, or this has, if not applies to them at all because they don't experience anything. But guess what, even you not experiencing anything, there is something under here that says that you don't experience anything. So as much you try to run and get away from labels, which yes, I am guilty of trying to always get away sometimes from labels, they're here. So it applies to
Yeah.
everything. um
Yeah, like the lack of data is itself a form of data, and so the
yep,
lack of a label is itself a label, so you can't really avoid it.
exactly. So the who, what,
Hmm.
this one can be maybe a touchy question, but I just really want to get people's perspectives on this too. Because again, this also almost jumps into my whole not my at least a bit of a spill into the next topic. But again, this question here is when should sexuality be introduced?
Mm.
When should this be introduced? And when I think about it, there's already a lot of information here. Like I said, we only read a few of them, and we went through the whole line. The rest of them, as well as like you said, a lack thereof of different orientations,
Mhm.
can still be here on the spectrum without us, even knowing. So they're there. For me,
Yeah.
I do look at it from a developmental phase for me when it comes to kids, because again, I went through and I did psychology, and I went through and learned about at least the different developmental stages for children. And again, the logical side of myself, but also the emotional side of myself, pairing to one. For me, part of me says really roughly until about around maybe, not going to say like early teens, but somewhere in between, like maybe 10, maybe 10, 12. because especially some girls during
Around
that time
when
as well.
puberty
When
starts, right? And
yeah,
which actually
that's where
is earlier for girls than for boys. Yeah.
yes. And I think
Yeah.
that's where, again, for me, logically, because of the developmental, and I'm glad you say puberty because I was forgetting the word in my head, which it's like, I
Mhm.
ain't gonna forget puberty. But that's for me, logically, to think about it because, again, at that time, so middle school, if I would think about really middle school for some of these kids, but on the emotional side of me, especially again, if you're a parent or if you are uncle or whatever family ties that you have to children, if you see expressions of that already happening early on to kids, I mean, you can approach and do that to, again, your child or have the talk, or if they ever ask about, what is this or what is that, like there's
Mhm.
always that time to do that. But I will say this, it's very difficult to be able to screen and filter out such things like this, especially when kids go to school. So also preparing your kids that way too, to again be in the know, so they're not confused. That's the main thing for me with a lot of this stuff, is to be able to at least give some background before stuff like that happens. Before child's not too sure, letting them know
Mhm.
when and where and how that, because again, you give a child, or even if you give me or an adult, you give us multiple choices for stuff, sometimes some people's not going to know what they want to do and what to choose and what they pick. They may like how this sounds, but then they might like how that looks, or they might like how that might sound later on, but now they ended up changing their mind. So sometimes, I'm not saying controlled choice, but at least being able to explain and let it figure out as experience comes. That's at least my perspective on, in short.
Yeah, that is true. And at the same time, I think that the programming starts at a much earlier age because you know how conservatives say, the
Yeah.
the queer agenda or the gay agenda. The irony of that is that
Yeah.
it's actually the straight agenda, right? Uh,
Oh
or the
yeah.
cis agenda because everywhere, like kids as young as 4 or 5 are already asked questions like, "Oh, is that your boyfriend?" or "Who's your girlfriend?" and often they don't ask them of the same gender, they ask that of the opposite genders, right? Which means there's already an assumption that they are heterosexual and that they will be heterosexual, once they grow up to really learn about their identities, right?
Yes.
So so then the question becomes like, what is the programming and what is the truth, right? And that's why we have so much. This is a term that's used by the neurodivergent community, but I think it also applies to sexuality. This term called
Mm.
masking, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
we mask to pretend to be neurotypical,
Yeah.
and we get so good at masking that over time we even forget that we're different, that we forget that we're actually neurodivergent because we don't even have a term to describe who we are until we get, either diagnosed by a medical practitioner or more recently there's self-diagnosis tests online.
Yes.
And the reason why we need self-diagnosis tests is because the medical community still doesn't recognize neurodivergence as an actual thing that without the ableism, they even when they recognize it,
Mm.
they see it as a disease that needs to be cured, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of neurodivergent people, we don't even want to go to a doctor to or a psychiatrist or whatever to diagnose. We self-diagnose for that reason.
Yeah.
And is a very rare doctor who does it without the ableism, who diagnose, So it's very similarly for decades they even had electroshock conversion therapies for people who identify as homosexual to turn them
See,
into
you
straight people. Right.
you already starting to get into some stuff that I do have again, and this is to the weaponized. But I'm glad that you brought that up. I'll
Yeah,
bring up my point. I'm gonna bring up my point to what to add on to yours after the fact. But continue.
right. So in such a world, right, the
Peace
question
and love to
become
everybody.
when do people know versus when should they know is it's a very simple question without a definite answer
Yeah.
because there is so much oppression and programming and so much suppression of the truth.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes. And I'm glad again that you brought up a lot of these points, because for me, with a lot of this too, again, it starts at home, and it starts with the grounding in the building at home, so that again, all of this information and experiences that will be had by the children, kids, all the way up into adulthood, they at least have some type of bearing, versus again just leaving people in the dark and them for them just to figure it out. Again, it's going to happen either way, but as for me as a parent, if I were to be a parent or as just a guide in general, I would at least give some type of, not path, but at least some ideas of where and what could happen, so then the scenarios will be ready and you're good to go. Because I'll say this, there's agendas for all of this stuff. So for me personally, there is a gay agenda, there's a straight agenda, there's all these different agendas. When you look at it and you mask everything, there's not mask, but you unveil everything. There's agendas all
mhm,
around us every single day. It's just up to you. Are you tuned into it heavily because you're a paying attention for a good reason, or are you tuned into it for, again, we can say the quote unquote negative reason? Is that why it's coming out to you? But again, what these agendas do, like you said before, it programs, not only programs, but then it adds on top of the confusion, again, of us versus them type of feel, is that if you're
mhm,
on this agenda or you see this agenda, then that means you have to be against all these other agendas. Now, knowing that you can learn about all these multiple agendas and then figure out, okay, what does it have to do with you? But
mhm.
one thing I will end up saying, and again, correct me, get me on it, whatever it may end up being, because we haven't done the devil's or the, again, the detractors, the other side flip of all this stuff too in a
I
while.
think you
But
already just did that, yeah.
yeah, but
Hmm.
one thing at least to at least in my eyes to answer, or in my thoughts to answer your question about at least the straight agenda and who and how all of this ends up happening, especially how kids are already attuned to knowing boyfriend, girlfriend, and all of this stuff too, is part of it to me goes back to that primitive, what we would call the amygdala, that center of the resources, those primal, you know, instincts and things that we have in us to reproduce,
Hmm.
already gives us that bearing to start. Because as a species, that's one thing that we're going to do, whether or not we, again, on the spectrum of sexuality things and stuff, that's things that again are later learned. Some, it's already in tune. But that's the other thing that I want to speak on and get into it later, is that some folks do come in, and I only have one example of speaking of this, but there are different native as well as ancient tribes and communities that folks came and literally they're already on the spectrum. And we've spoken about it before, but I like to bring it up, of how literally each of them, the primary focus again of them expressing themselves in a different way, or whether if it was homosexuality, whether if it's all these other ones on the spectrum, it was understood that they had a role and a really huge task again within the tribes. I use the Dagora tribe as an example because I've read the book. There's other many different tribes. I need to do my research so I got a notable number of them. But again, the primary on that was to be able to again give back, and they were included into the community. There wasn't necessarily always infighting and things of that sort. Everybody knew again what people's roles, jobs, and what they brought within the community. Not saying it's a terrible thing, not saying is a great thing, but again, it brings people together. And with sexuality as of now, with all a lot of this stuff, the primary is really still for the person. Just, all right, what am I going to do? How do I end up seeing myself? How do I, identify with this? And most of the time, it's more for, again, the word sexuality, that the state of basically expressing sex. That's all it is. It's in the sexual sense, not in the purposeful sense, being again the primary. I'm not saying it's bad to be like, oh, you're gonna express your sex this way. Like, no, but again, with purpose. A lot of this stuff with purpose. For what purpose? Is it just because you want to feel better, or is it because you're gonna be able to educate and help maneuver the next generation? Whatever it may end up being when it comes to at least identifying that way. So my whole roundabout with that is, again, the whole innate feelings that we have is just so that we can reproduce as a species. And then again, you get brought into the binary, brought into the whole again agendas, and you start to put your associations to all of that again from your family, friends, and your environment around you.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now, what's another one I like? Wow, I like, my poem in the background. I just said the same thing right now. Uh, Again, my music sometimes it just plays in the background just at the right moments. So now we went from the who, what, when, um, where, where. I'll say this. I'll
Uh,
say it like this in this particular. But go ahead.
why, right? I think we
We
already
almost
did the
why.
how, which is the how. Well, no, we did the how, not the why, because the how is
Yeah.
the mechanism of how
Yeah.
sexuality and
Yes.
sexual attraction works, which is the demisexual, asexual uh, spectrum, right? That
Yes.
whole spectrum, and
Yes.
and but the why, right? Why do we even have sexuality, and why do we even have
Mm,
sex?
yes. I love it. I'm glad you on it with me. I appreciate it. The last one I knew I have after this is a question in my head. It'd be like, okay, but yes, not gonna say but I just said it. For me, when you think about the why, of course, the first one I just spoke on earlier. Again, this is to continue again the human species. In that particular case, for some folks who subscribe to the Bible or subscribe to any religious text, be fruitful and multiply is one of the things. That's one of the mechanisms within us. Again, as humans, to continue the generation. Because if not, yes, until you find technology that's able for folks to do this, like we was talking about earlier, artificial insemination, all these other different things, then life can prolong beyond that. But again, one of the main purposes, again, is keep the species going. Another reason why we do it, as well, is this is another way of connection for folks. Again, some people, again, we talk about the romantic and then the sexual, those planes. But is another one is to have that connection, because when you do engage in that, there are different hormones and different neurotransmitters and things that are put out when you do that. The one that we talk about, which people say is the big O, call it the orgasm, whatever, is the oxytocin. And that helps to basically bind and literally connect more with a person, again, on that sexual level, which then leads to the third one for me, also to connect in a spiritual sense, because then there are different text like tantra sex and like all these different other Kama Sutra, all these other different texts that talk about not only just from that sexual aspect, but again within how that creates what I call a soul tie when you do engage with that with another person. So why we do this again, and then of course the last one for pleasure. I mean, pleasure, dopamine. There you go. But what do you got?
Yeah, the why is, well, why we have sex on the base level is just to reproduce, right? But uh, on another level, it's more about creating different bonds of community and communal structures. And so there are different levels. And I think that answer also ties into why we have not only sexuality, but different forms of sexuality. It's basically our biology creating a diversity of different bonds
Yes.
uh, in order uh, to help the parents raise the child. And so even that goes back to even so even asexual people contributes towards those ties
Hmm.
because of the saying, it takes a village to raise a
It's a
child,
child.
right?
Yes.
And, but within that larger understanding, it's also important to understand how sexual attraction works because it ties in with the why, right? Those two like go hand in hand. And there is a great book by there's actually two great related books. One is called Peace Between the Sheets,
Mm.
and the other is called Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. And Come As You Are is about it's based on the search for the female Viagra, and
Mm.
they they searched for years and they couldn't find it. But and the reason why they couldn't find it was apparently because each woman's uh, or really anybody with a uterus and a vagina, right? Uh, Anybody who has that mechanism,
Yeah.
they have each person has such a unique sexual attraction mechanism
Yeah.
that they realize it's impossible to find one drug for all of them, a universal drug. But what they did find was patterns, right?
Mm.
That they can use to increase their libido without
Yeah.
drugs. But they found a better way, basically, through that research. Even though they technically
Mm.
failed, they found a better way. And like one of the mechanisms is like uh, a safe environment is very important.
Yeah.
Uh, Feeling safe because there is almost like an accelerator in their sexual attraction mechanism, but there's also a brake. And the
Yeah.
brake is for when they don't feel safe, right? And the other part, and then the other book, Peace Between the Sheets, talks about how the difference it creates a distinction between climax and orgasm.
Mm.
Climax is when you jack off and uh, you feel this pleasure, right? And
For
but
all
it's
y'all
very
on
limited.
YouTube and everywhere else, I'm sorry, not for me, but for me, for what I've been speaking about earlier. But yes, this is we. This is it's not. If you haven't had sex ed, there you go. But go ahead.
When you flick the bean, right, for women, uh, and but it's localized. It's localized to a certain
Yeah.
region. That's climax.
Yeah.
Whereas orgasm is more like a whole body thing.
Mm.
And the thing is, biologically, the climax is more, at least in the beginning, it's more emphasized uh, to get you to, to do the deed first, to get you fucking right quickly as possible, uh, so that you can reproduce.
Yeah.
Uh, but the thing is, because it's designed that way,
Yeah.
that is the book claims that that is the reason why a lot of relationships break up after 2 to 4 years because they're the thing, right? The mechanism no longer needs its host. It's almost like a parasite in a way. It no longer
Mm.
needs its host, right? But then the luckily biology steps in and the oxytocin kicks in,
Yeah.
right? Because you still need the parents to raise the child, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when the human host of these mechanisms, when they're still addicted to the dopamine high of the climax,
Yeah.
that's when they get bored. But if they learn to lean more into the oxytocin, the
Oxytocin.
bonding
Mm-hmm.
hormone, which is a bonding hormone rather than the
The body. Yeah.
pure
I was
like
gonna. Yep.
pleasure hormone of the dopamine, then that's when the
Yeah.
relationship can last longer, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so the why and the how are interconnected in that sense because the why is that nature not only needs the parents to reproduce, but they
Yeah.
also need the parents to stay together long enough to make sure that the baby that's produced actually
The
lives and
offspring.
survives to produce
Mm-hmm.
another baby because we have a
Mm-hmm.
very long gestation period. We have a 9 month
Yeah.
gestation period, and our babies take 18 years to actually be fully functional, right? Whereas with say a
Yeah.
deer, I think a deer becomes adult in within 9 months, something like that. Other animals it's faster than humans.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. We say we the most advanced. I mean, in a way, but then at the same time, it's because we take longer. I guess we age like
Right.
fine
Yeah.
wine. supposedly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, uh, thank you. No, thank you for sharing a lot of that. Because then again, adding to all of this, and hopefully some of y'all is taking notes. I know I've been taking notes and being reminded of some stuff, as well as always
Mhm.
different great recommendations for books again from yourselves. So again, if y'all interested, if y'all are not doing it already, please go ahead and
Mhm.
follow Kundan. I'm gonna have all the information again on YouTube and then on Instagram. All you gotta do is come in and check, and you'll see the at in the program. So please
Mhm.
follow for more information from Kundan.
Yeah.
Um, Now the last one, and then after that, I really want to jump into this to the final topic, and then just keep this going on and moving to how it all
Yeah,
goes
it's
together.
a good
So
segue
the
into the
last
final
one,
topic because,
yeah, not yet,
manipulating
not yet,
those
not yet.
mechanisms is how you
Yeah,
weaponize it, right? Yeah.
look, to end it off, the the where. We already talking
Mm,
about that. The way we talk about the where, and then we're out because we're gonna be somewhere else after this with the next topic. But you know, I put two where questions. The first one
mhm,
is, where can sexuality be expressed? And then the add on to that is there an appropriate place to express sexuality?
mhm,
Because the reason
mhm,
why I add the two different ones is we have a whole idea again of public displays of affection, PDA, when it
mhm.
comes to things and stuff. Because don't forget, sexuality is not only the act of sex, it is also the behaviors as well as the expression or the identification. All of those in there together. So the question again with, where can you display sexuality? And the second one to it
Right.
is, again, the whole idea of appropriate. Where's the appropriate, where's the appropriate place to express that, quote unquote?
Mhm. Yeah. That's almost like a loaded question, right?
It
Because
is.
it depends on cultural and social programming. Because it starts with the fact that we're the only animals that wear clothes and hide our bodies, right?
Exactly.
All other animals are naked all the time, and they're also having sex all the time in public, out in nature, and they don't care who sees them. They're just doing the deed, you know.
Yeah.
And with humans, that's why we have bedrooms, and we try to hide the act. Now, even
Yeah.
though a lot of people have had sex everywhere. There are people who've had sex on the beach, sex in the airplane bathroom, the
Oh
Mile
yeah,
High
that's the part
Club,
of my
right?
club. Yep.
The Mile High Club, uh, which is the forbidden sex. Well, forbidden sex is also a big turn on for a lot of people, which is why they like to
Mm,
join the Mile High Club, right? And
yeah.
in fact, somebody was telling me a few weeks ago how she had sex uh, in a public park with people walking around and no one knew she was having sex. Because what she did was she was on a park bench and wearing a skirt, and she lifted up her skirt and straddled him sitting on, so no one knew that they were doing it. Right?
Yeah.
And it was like just in plain sight. So there are even people who have done that, things like that. And even that ties back into the thrill of the danger, right, of being discovered, the forbidden sex thing, right? And that's fascinating to me because I think I mentioned it to you in one of the lives, actually in our interview when you interviewed me when I said, uh, I was saying how it's very difficult to find a movie where sex is shown in a healthy, peaceful, loving, nourishing way. Like it's always a
Mm,
movie about forbidden sex. Like
well, the 50 Shades of Grey.
yeah, it's always like very dark. You know, it's either very dark or they make a comedy out of it. There's nothing in the middle ground,
40-year-old
right?
version.
But yeah, exactly. They either make fun of it or they make it very scary, right?
Yeah.
And so right there, there's an agenda, right? And but it ties into your question, like where, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like in reality, sex can be done anywhere,
Yeah.
but in practicality, it's almost like it's done almost nowhere.
Mm,
That's the irony, right? The paradox. Because of the oppression and suppression of sex.
boom. And I will add my spiel, but you already done numbered it down to the T with the explanation, so I love it. So I'm just gonna go ahead
Mm.
because I love where you're going with this, and let's segue into the last topic for tonight. Which the last topic we're gonna talk about
Mm.
is the weaponization of sex, because we was already alluding to it with a number of things. So to head back to, again, for those in here, if you don't know, I'm gonna keep saying it. Kundan's probably tired of me saying it too. You look at the question, you notice they link up together for a particular reason. Why? Because
Mm.
all of this stuff all ties in some way, shape, and form. Even though we're talking about sexuality, yes, you still see the word sex in it. Now you see how we're talking about weaponization of sex, and you see that these two tie together because, again, we're going to get specifically into how these different orientations, as well as ways to express yourself and things of that nature, is misunderstood to a point where it is used against numbers of folks.
Mm.
But the first one I want to talk about, because I told you back way when you start talking about the shock therapy for folks that identified. Just a small history for y'all as well too. On top of that, because again, I took psychology as well as I went into and I got my master's in social work. And there's this book called the DSM, which is the
Mm.
Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders. And I wanted to speak on this because of the fact that the first edition of the DSM, which was in 1952, and yes, I'm using some notes. I remembered a few of it, but not all of it. They actually classified homosexuality as a mental disorder
Mm.
in the first
Yeah,
edition of
exactly.
the
Yeah.
DSM.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
after, again, this was not only challenged by a number of different riots as well as protests, et cetera, et cetera. Finally, in the 70s, specifically 1973, that the APA, which for those who don't know about the APA, that's just literally the American Psychiatric Association. That's why for some folks, if y'all were in college, y'all either had MLA format or APA format. These are these folks ended up changing again and taking homosexuality out as a disorder. But for some folks, and especially now myself is getting privy to this too, is that actually they took out at least the name of homosexuality from being a disorder, but they recoded it as being distressed by their homosexuality. So there is actually a mental uh, health diagnostic that's named ego dystonic sexual orientation. So they
Mm.
have something still in there, but not on the terms of it being homosexuality. Now, how are you saying does this tie into the weaponization of sex? Well, again, if you have different systems and layers that are telling you something's wrong with you pertaining to how you identify yourself, again goes to show how the propaganda, the agendas, and how TV, social media, wherever else is being displayed, puts you out there in a negative or a bad light, whatever it may be, without giving more background and more information on what it is and how it has an effect. Again, we love to talk about the symptoms all day. We love to be like, all right, go get you some Sudafed. All right, go get you a Tylenol for your
Mm.
headache. But we don't get at the root. We don't get to learn. We know the root, but we decide, the root's gonna be chilling. Versus, let's go figure the root out. So then, again, we can not only find a cure, but we can have a very close remedy to being able to be like, okay,
Mm.
now I understand why, or I understand why this happens. So again, I just wanted to share that piece going off from your point way back when. But when we talk
Mm.
about the weaponization of sex, yes, we're gonna go everywhere with it, as well as in the name of a weapon. There's albums that has said sex is a weapon. If you listen and you see, again, a lot of this is via programming, that sex sells. That's the weaponization of sex as well too. Knowing that for people to get products, you're gonna have people like Paris Hilton, you're gonna have Anna Nicole Smith, Marilyn Monroe, all these other different folks, Hugh Hefner, all these different. I know I'm named a lot of white people, but again, I know there's all in the different places.
Right.
But again, think of the system and where we're at, especially if you're in the U.S. I mean, that also spans out again to all around. But again, you have all these different idols, and they end up again pulling you in to indulge in whatever this is, whether if they're trying to sell you a hamburger, they're trying to sell you a lifestyle, they're trying to sell you any type of idea or even item. And they do this again by using a lot of suggestive sexual innuendos. And that's one of
Yeah,
the ways
even the
again.
fact that sex sells, right, is partly because of that whole forbidden sex narrative and vice versa, right? Because sex is
Mm-hmm.
so suppressed, uh, sex sells even more, ironically, and
Yes.
sex sells even more uh, as it gets more suppressed, right?
Yes.
And and of course, people want sex anyway, so it would, it would sell anyways, even without the oppression. But the oppression makes it sell even more, ironically.
Yes.
Uh,
Again, telling somebody that they cannot indulge in something because they are in a certain the demographic, a certain orientation,
mhm.
low income, whatever it is, for us
It
naturally,
makes them want it more. Yeah.
exactly. I'll give an example, which is not it still applies, but it doesn't. And I don't want us to get into it and start talking about it. I was trying to avoid it, but I just want to use it as an example. So I was writing a song. I finished writing a song. I don't need to do no promotion here for y'all. It's all good. But literally in the song, I was trying to avoid, because I had wrote previously to whatever the situation that happened, the Will Smith whole situation, that debacle. I was trying to avoid using
Oh, the
a
Will
Will
Smith
Smith
thing.
bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even want to. It's distraction. But I didn't want to
Yeah.
end up using a bar that I already wrote about Will Smith, because all of this was trending, and for me it was just it's very easy to try to go into and like add to that, and I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
add to the distraction. So I decided, you know what, I'm gonna take the bar out. And what I mean by bar, I'm gonna take the words that I was writing for it to link it to the song out, but unintentionally, because I was trying to force myself to be like, all right, take the bar out. Unintentionally, while I was writing, there was still a subtle bar about Will Smith somewhere, shape, and form in there through a different reference. To a point I was just
Oh.
like, you know what? Even though I tried to be like, yo, nope, you can't, you shouldn't put it, and it still showed up, which is very funny. To your point about, again, keeping people away from it, saying you can't end up having it or you can't experience it, and then making people want it more. And again, that's a part of the tactic to weaponize that.
It's like the don't think of a pink elephant, right?
Mm-hmm.
You think of the pink elephant, like.
Yep, exactly. Another example on top of that too, of an idea too of the weaponization of sex too, is I remember the movie by Spike Lee, being Chirac, and the whole aspect of Chirac was for the women that was in that movie to withhold from
Oh
having
yeah,
sex,
I've
to
seen that
change the
movie. Yeah.
behaviors, of the men, so that's how all the shooting and all this other different stuff can change. Just women ain't gonna give you no sex at all. And realistically, we know how a lot of that goes, because you're already talking about before how and why sexuality or even engaging in sex is a thing, but then trying to withhold for a different certain reason. Yes, in a way, I'm showing it in a saying like it's in a negative light, like weaponized. There's the spectrum. Again, there's the good, the bad, however, for whatever you want to end up doing. But realistically, is that going to even really happen? No.
Mm-hmm.
No. But in that sense of being able to say, well, if we're going to do this away from this, then you can't have any of this. And again, goes back to your point with, well, then if that's the case, then you're going to end
Yeah.
up wanting it
I
more.
mean, on a smaller scale, we that's why we have the so-called playing hard to get,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, of
Yeah.
course, the 90-day rule, all these other,
Oh, the
again,
3 day, don't
society
call for
made.
3 days rule. The first
Yeah,
3 days, yeah.
that's why it's a
Yeah.
dating game. I don't like playing. Personally, now I'm putting this my most part on this side is I don't play the dating game like that because of all of this stuff like that. Again, you want a connection, create a connection. I'm a whole again. We all experience and do it our own way, but for me, it's like, yeah, no, I'm trying to cut through all of that. Why we gotta play a game? Like, let's all right then, let's go play Monopoly or something. Or you want to play the Xbox? Like, no, I'm not trying to play this game of emotions high, run low, thoughts this way, that way. Do you like me? You don't, and then get upset because then you wasted time. And nah, nah. I time is already made up how we have it, and I'm not just trying to keep adding to it. Let's progress some way. But that's my
Mm.
side spiel on that.
Yeah.
Another point.
And the
Another point.
funny thing about playing Hard to Get, as a side note, is that originally it came out of a book by Eileen Fisher and her co-author called The Rules.
Mm,
This was back in the 80s, and it was a rule. It was apparently meant for women to catch a husband, right? And that's where the 3 day rule comes. We have other weird rules like women must have straight hair, so which clearly shows it was actually targeted at white women specifically, right? And the funny thing about that is 20 years later, in the 2000s, around that time,
yeah.
male pickup artists started using the same concepts from the rules and then combined it with some other pop psychology from evolutionary biology and claimed and asked men to use it on women, claiming that it is, but it's actually just regarding that.
I'm sorry, I missed a lot of that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, because yeah,
Because insecure people will be attracted to methods that make them feel even more insecure, and they will try to prove themselves as secure. That's all it is. It's just human psychology.
mm,
Yeah.
again, and that's why also psychology is in that aspect too, with the weaponization of all of this here. But adding along with that, there's another point I remember that you brought up, and I wanted to continue with that point. Yes, the whole idea, and this is through the movies that you were speaking on earlier, about how the outlook of sex is shown, at least to us in the U.S. Because I can at least speak from my experience being out in Europe, specifically in Italy, in Florence, and seeing the difference of how sex, at least, or sexuality is seen out there versus out here when it comes to the youth and how open it is with, again, how it's shown. It's not like hidden like the apple garden, the Eve, and all this other different stuff, or it's not shamed upon, oh, you're bad if you do this or do that. It's more so of, again, a conversation. But here I want to speak on it on how how you saying earlier of how a lot of that gets into the forbidden side of sex. And again, all the words and the context clues to like, oh, this is something you're not supposed to be getting into, things of that sort, which either brings people closer to one and doing it, or like you said, represses them from doing it, which then ends up clouding their perspective and they're knowing on, okay, then how is sex a quote unquote normal thing to speak about? Is it a correct thing or appropriate thing to speak about? When, and again, when we talked about
Yeah.
earlier, the when and where and all of that, but the weaponization of that makes it to a point where it's not talked about at all. So then you're just gonna go out here fumbling, figuring it out for yourself, which can lead down the road for, again, we have our STDs, our STIs, and all of this stuff. Even though that information is out there, it's, again, the fear mongering aspect of it. But I know you had something. Go ahead.
Yeah, that even ties into the why, right? The why of the weaponization. Why do people even weaponize sex, right? I
Yeah.
think it's just easier to control people when you weaponize. Like you hinted at earlier, sex sells, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and when you forbid it, it sells even more. right?
Yes.
And that's the irony of it. And then you even start influencing people's economic lives, right? Their
Yes.
economics. Like that's why we have a lot of men motivated to work hard to prove themselves as potential breadwinner, right?
Yes.
And then conversely, there's a lot of women out there who try to play into the whole Madonna whore complex, right?
Mm,
Where they try to be the good the good girl in the streets and the bad girl in the sheets, right? That
yeah.
whole uh, dynamic, and which
Or
itself
Little
will
John,
eventually,
or
yeah,
Little John and Usher would say, "I'm a lady in the streets, but a freak in the bed."
right, exactly, yeah. And even that playing into that will eventually mess up with the psychology, right, for women. And then for men, it also messes up their psychology in different ways. They get into workaholism and all these things, right? And it all began with the De Beers Diamond Company making these ads. And in the original ad, it
Mm,
literally said that men should buy a diamond ring for a woman if he wants to marry her. Diamond ring that's worth 2 months his salary. Not just 1 month, 2 months his salary to prove himself. Which means he must have that much in savings already. He cannot be a man living paycheck to paycheck, right? Already, like all of that is built into the advertising psychology of that. And to this day, there are both men and women playing into that dynamic.
yes.
Women demanding men to buy diamond rings, thousands of dollars,
Yes.
and men uh, doing it, to prove themselves. Right.
Again, that's where these expectations, these unwritten rules that start to become what we think are norms. But again, it's like, where did a lot of this originate from? We like, again, we don't go to the root. A lot of this
And
stuff
they
has been
think it's their own
commercialized.
desires. It's just programming, and they think it's their own desires. And that's why I always keep emphasizing, always question yourself: is this a craving, a program, or a true desire?
Hmm.
Always keep asking yourself that question.
Do you want what you need, or do you need what you want? And again, that's
Yeah.
a conundrum in a sense of itself. But that's, again, great to question this stuff, but that's okay. I hear something outside. Some sound like it fell.
Uh,
But uh again, that's why looking at a lot of this, that's why I want to break it down, the whole weaponized idea of it. I wanted to also backtrack again and give some more visuals to what you were speaking on with um honestly this liberation movement for women to, express their bodies and stuff like that. Even back way when there was also an ideal and a picture of a sex symbol. We have these sex symbols as well as these quotes on sex pistols. So even the weapon in itself with sex is paired there together, talking about this is the ideal look, feel, things that started that such. So if you're trying to look and get toward this to have whatever type of experience, the best that you end up having, you have to end up either looking like this or you want somebody to look like this. Again, it's the whole attraction set up there. But again, the purpose on top of that, like yours, what you were saying, especially where you're at, is there emotional connection? Is there more there besides of what you're just looking at? Because again, when that happens, either male, female, or along the whole spectrum, they can use that against you, knowing that if that's all that you want from them or the person, whoever it may end up being, they can play, like you said earlier, we said these games to again gaslight, manipulate you into going ahead, either spending money on it to try to get it, work at different things to do it just to show and prove that you are quote unquote worthy to again receive quote unquote sex or whatever that you are trying to get from somebody, which is another way of promoting very unhealthy relationships and exchange
Mhm.
between folks, which again, it shouldn't be just a one way of communication and exchange. It should be more so of a communal feel together, as in we're doing this because we're here together on this point, not because you want it more than I do or I want it more than you do, so then you're gonna have to do this to get that. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. No.
Mhm.
And then
And then also movies, I think, add another layer of programming because if you look, especially if you look at
Disney.
movies from the 80s, yeah, the Star Wars, Disney, like, you literally see in Star Wars the iconic scene of Harrison Ford's character uh, kissing Princess Leia, and she says no many many times, and he literally forces a kiss
Mm,
on her, and that is seen by generations of kids as romantic, right? Same thing with, in fact, Harrison Ford again plays Indiana Jones, and in
yes.
one of the Indiana Jones movies at the end, again the woman says no and walks away from him, and he literally whips her and pulls the rope back towards him and kisses him, and it ends with them. The movie ends with them kissing and all the children surrounding them, which, by the way, also plays into the white male savior complex as well. Always these people going into African countries, but that's a side note. But yeah, it literally ends like that, which again so it's goes into programming people into violence is sexy, right? Forcing
Mm-hmm.
yourself on people is sexy.
Which can get into a whole nother thing and topic that we can't talk
Yeah,
about that may be bleeped out again from
yeah,
YouTube and all these other different
yeah,
platforms because it's like, no. But again, I
yeah.
know there's it's about time I know for you to make
Mhm.
your move and stay. So I'm gonna give you that. I'm gonna put another point that I'm gonna speak about, and then after that I'll wrap up from the show. But anything else you wanted to add to this weaponization of sex, and then you want to give your
Yeah,
last final thoughts of just the show in general.
yeah. One last thing I wanted to say because you mentioned Disney there. I once saw this funny meme. One had a picture of a disappointed man saying, men who grew up on porn, asking the question, "Where's my insatiable lover?" Right? And then women who grew up on Disney asking themselves, "Where's my Prince Charming?" So the programming has totally like messed up both people. You know, it's totally messed up all their. I know there are more genders than that, but those are the more recognized ones. And then
Yes.
it gets even more complicated for people who identify as non-binary and gender fluid and queer. And that the psychology of suppression
Yes.
messes us even more in some ways because there's literally no mirror for us, right? In fact, that even applies to demisexuals, the importance of not only representation, but correct representation,
Patient.
right? Uh, in fact, I once posted a book review of Ray Barra,
Yeah.
and I mentioned the asexual and also demisexual representation in the book. And somebody posted a really insightful, illuminating comment when she said, I always believed I was demisexual, but because there was no mirror
Yeah.
and nobody else that seemed to be demisexual around me,
Yeah.
I she hid behind the mask again, similar to the maskings, behind the shell, and behaved as if she was normal in quotes, right?
Yeah.
Uh, in other words, she ended up having to gaslight herself, hiding behind the shell
Mm,
because there was no correct mirror to really validate and confirm my identity, right?
yes.
So that also speaks into the programming and the weaponizations where, the only thing that's allowed is a very narrow spectrum of what's considered normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And you touched on something that I'm about to touch on and end a little bit with the show. But again, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much, Kundan.
Yeah.
And Any last thoughts, or was that it that you had for us?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's yeah. I was about to say something, but I forgot. But yeah, that's the main thing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much again. Like you always do, come through for What's the Word. Always thankful for your time. Now go ahead, get you some rest, and catch you another time. Appreciate you.
All right. Peace. Yeah.
Peace. Now, y'all, to get the last bit of this done, another point that I wanted to add, but before I had that point, I also wanted to go back. And maybe for those who were paying attention, or I'm not gonna say we're paying attention, but we're wondering, okay, what we're gonna talk about the difference between Europe and then the US when it comes to the sex and sexuality, things of that sort. And the only thing I can say for me when I was in Italy and Florence, of course, the sculptures and the different paintings and things of sorts, of course, depicted the human body naked, and it wasn't, again, there was no visceral reaction, whether it was from kids or from children, whoever may have been there. It was more of a, for lack of better terms, a normalized thing to where it's like, oh yeah, that's just a body. Versus out here in the U.S., again, you cover, covered up everywhere, but it's more like you keep a lot of that stuff hidden. You don't show that to the kids. You put your hands over their eyes so they don't see certain scenes, things of that sort. I mean, again, that's at least what I've gotten to experience when I was out there in Italy. Like it's already out there and seen. While out here, it's a lot more sheltered versus a bit more open out there. Now, the last point I wanted to touch on, and Kundan alluded to it a bit, and the whole aspect again of again to the movie programming, because a lot of this weaponization happens not only on the physical, but the mental, the spiritual, the psychological, and emotional. All of this happens, whether if it's through the manipulation, TV programming. Image is very important because again, all of our senses are informed in some way, shape, or form with a lot of this stuff. So for it to weaponize it, you attack all the different sources of senses. And again, one of the main ones that we like to use or we're using to help us navigate, of course, is these two things here. So last thing I'm going to speak on about it, and we're going to end it here, is the whole idea, again, of the whole Disney fairy tale through the movies, as well as the use of prawn or porn for everyone and how that is weaponized in itself. And how I see it weaponized in that particular case, again, for women, even with prawn or however you want to end up saying it too, as well as Disney fairy tales and the love novels and the books and things of all of that sort, it gives very high expectations for what a sexual relationship is supposed to be and look like versus experiencing and finding out what works for you. Because again, not everybody is going to express or indulge in sex the same ways. It's going to, you have to find what you like. It's like me saying that I like chocolate ice cream or I like some type of chocolate and you end up liking sprinkles or something in that case. You don't like chocolate ice cream. You like vanilla. You like uh Napoleon. Yeah, Napoleon, Neapolitan, whatever. All those different aspects you have to find out and figure out what works for you, because again, it's not a one size fit all for everybody. Like we spoke about before, the spectrum is hitting on one of many different expressions and places you can put yourself. So that doesn't mean literally there's only one right way, either religion, identity, all of this, etc. But what Disney and all the fairy tale movies, as well as what prawn, especially a lot for men, what it does is these unrealistic expectations of how sex and the sexual, again, act is supposed to look, how it's supposed to feel, and what you're supposed to do. So what ends up happening is, again, it's weaponized to a point where there is some repression, or there is an overstimulation to a point where, for some folks, again, for men, semen, for women, the same thing. A lot of that is life energy. And when you do let go of, at least for men, the semen and things of that sorts, you losing the part of that life essence. And especially knowing that one of the main purposes for it is to reproduce, and you're doing it to a point where the potency, again, is not there anymore due to, again, the prawn and those unrealistic expectations of what a woman, man, wherever is supposed to do for you, or the whole ride of the spectrum. You repress those feelings and you engage in those feelings on your own, and it can go against, some people say there's a depopulation agenda, which you can go look up articles, you can find that. King Harry talks about, needing to depopulate Africa and other different places, as well as Bill Gates, same thing. You can look this stuff up. Again, Instagram, YouTube, you're going to get mad at me. Go get mad at all the other articles that are up there from the news. They have all of that stuff there. So don't get mad at me. And with, again, going back into the Disney, what it does is that it puts a harder pressure on how, again, we said, healthy relationships are supposed to look versus what comes out, which is unhealthy relationships. And then what that happens is then there's a breakdown of the function of the family. And then again, main purpose with a lot of this too, with, again, sex, again, to recreate and move and create the next generation. If we have all of these miscommunications and the weaponization of either stopping birth, low birth rate, all forms of this through sexuality, trying to figure yourself, confusion, you have so many different obstacles to that stop any of this from happening. And that in itself, again, through all the programming from the news, whether it's from movies, whether if it's the books, whether if it's through manipulation of what is right and what is quote unquote wrong, all of this stuff, it stops the main purpose and you forget the why you're doing a lot of this stuff. And you hide from it, you lose out on stuff, you don't know how to properly address and do a lot of these things because you take everything for face value without experiencing it for yourself. I'll leave it with this note and then I'll put in the wrap up and we're out. Last thing I wanted to say on this is it's just, again, like how I like to say there's the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is basically knowing information, knowing the ledge, knowing what information and stuff is given to you. So I can tell you about a number of different facts and things and look it up. But wisdom is the application and the use of that information and knowledge. So if I'm able to go and now I've talked about, look at this is the whole list of what's at this restaurant, but then I'm telling you, oh, this might be a good place to eat, but I haven't went yet. That's only I have knowledge of the information of what's on the menu in this restaurant. But the wisdom comes in is that now I've went to the restaurant, I've either gotten what today's special was or what their specialty is, and whether if it tasted good or not, and I can come back and give a recommendation. So for me, the difference between the knowledge and the wisdom is knowing the information, knowing the ledge, and the wisdom is the application of that. So then you can come back and give recommendation and be able to say, with that experience, this is what you got. To wrap up with all of this here, again, when it comes to current events, be mindful of your surroundings, be mindful of what's going on, because you never know when, how, or something is can happen. So you can have a plan to properly prepare yourself, others, your family, and all those around you. So please stay informed any way you can, whether if it's reading or if it's watching the news or any other news outlets. 2, when it comes to sexuality, there is a spectrum. There is ways for you to identify from letter A all the way, at least from S, what I see now, but there can be more. I mean, there's transsexual, there's so many more down the line. But ultimately, there's a difference between romantic and the sexual, and how basically sexuality is whether you are engaging in the act, you are showing the behavior, whether if it's emotional connection, or how you identify and express it. And then lastly, the weaponization of sex comes from all forms. It hits all of our senses. And the main thing that we have to ask ourselves with that is, what is the purpose? Why is this happening? Asking all those questions to literally help figure out what is the purpose behind this. And when you're able to see all of that, you're able to pay attention to what the agendas are. Then you're able to help fully inform yourself on how to move and how to critically think. Because that's one thing that I would say is lacking within just the general public and in school. It's critical thinking. Not think how the school wants you to think or think how the teacher in the test wants you to think, but think for yourself. Use the knowledge, use the information and wisdom, and create your own thought process behind it so then you can fully understand it. But again, be aware of it. It's out there. It's happening. Just know your part and know what you're going to be doing. But with that, thank y'all so much for coming again. This has been another episode of What's the Word Wednesdays. This is season 3. It's been episode 5. Thank y'all for coming. Thank y'all for your time, your support, your sharing, and all of what you've added here. Shouts out again to Kundan. Shouts out again to everyone that came through. Especially, I got to give another shout out to Dog Days Are Over for you being here the whole time. Thank you so much. Again, if you're going to be watching this later, whether on Instagram or YouTube, please go follow me on YouTube at A.D.V.I.S. Speaks. I'm going to have more videos there for you, trying to reach 1,000 and keep pushing further. So go ahead, go subscribe to me over there because there'll be more like this and others to come. But with that, thank y'all so much. We'll see y'all again next Wednesday, as well as I'll have a poll put up sometime this week or next week about, again, What's the Word Wednesdays and some of the scheduling. But for now, I'll see y'all next Wednesday. Thank y'all so much. I've been your brother A.D.V.I.S. This has been What's the Word Wednesdays. We'll catch y'all next time. Peace and love.